Since the very beginning of our great country, men and women alike have stood to give their time, their wealth, and most importantly, their lives, all for the cause of freedom. Freedom, which our forefathers took seriously enough to bring to all who would take it up, namely a country free from tyranny and oppression. Through so many wars, many have given their lives to God and country for this wonderful freedom. Today we honor all who have gone before us and all who still find it necessary to continue this cause of freedom. It does not matter in which way they have served, but rather that they did serve and found a way to give their all. Daniel Webster defines a patriot as one who zealously gives their all for the sake of their country. This morning we honor all of these patriots before us, standing proud to have been a part of something more wonderful than themselves, the United States of America, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we all endeavor to keep this pledge and to support all who believe in it.
Oh, beautiful. Some doubt his birth was of a virgin. Some think his miracles can be explained away. Some say that he was just a good man. Even though he died, he wasn't really raised. Skeptics rise and speak their lies, but the truth is marching on. Truth is marching on down the corridors of time, invincible, divine, until all that's lost is finally gone. Truth is marching on. There will always be cynics and scoffers. Our faith has always had its noisy enemies. They may rise up, but only for a moment. Yet we see the evidence through the centuries. Jesus Christ, the way of life. Truth is marching on. Truth is marching on. Down the corridors of time, invincible, divine, until all that's false is finally gone. Truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Truth is marching on. Truth is marching on. Down the corridors of time, invincible, divine, until all that's lost is finally gone. Truth is marching on.
The song of the Patriot has been sung by generations who have gone before us. They have carried its melody and its rhythm through struggle and strife and through challenge and hardship. Now, it is up to us to make sure that through our courage and sacrifice, its words, are carried into the future.
Make it clear for anyone.
stand here today, a free nation, free to gather, free to object, free to worship as we choose, free to spread whatever gospel it is that we believe in. We accept or reject that which others preach. We have these very freedoms because of brave men and women who have had the courage and reserve to stand and to fight for their beliefs and for our freedoms. They stood on distant shores to secure and preserve the very freedoms we enjoy each and every day. This morning we are here to honor each one of you, to say thank you for the many sacrifices you have made in securing our freedoms. At this time, I would like all veterans to please stand and be recognized. May I say, your sacrifices have not gone unnoticed. Thank you for a job well done, and may God truly shine on each and every one of your lives. Amen.
One individual who has served, and he's part of our church here at Webster Assembly of God. His name is Joe Mack. And there's kind of a little bit of a bio in the bulletin about Joe. He's a World War II veteran. He was there on Normandy, D-Day, and he had the honor this past spring to travel with a group of veterans back to Normandy, France, where they celebrated the 70th anniversary of D-Day there. And Joe's going to come with his daughter Barb and share a little bit about his experiences and some pictures from times he served and also the trip there. So we welcome with me Joe Mack and his daughter Barb.
I'd like to start off by telling you that I appreciate beyond doubt all the prayers and support that you have given me and my journey, not only my journey of faith, but also my journey in my personal life. And especially like to thank Pastor Dan today for giving me this opportunity to come and tell you some of my stories, because my stories are the same as a lot of the veteran stories that served with me that are no longer with us. And their stories need to be told, and someone had to tell it. I went to the honor flight a couple years ago. It started me on my journey. And I began to realize I didn't really want to go. I thought, oh no, I didn't want to go back. I'd had enough. But I went anyway, and Barbie went with me. And it was quite an experience. And as I stood before each of those battles, and I remember different things about each battle, I said, somebody's got to tell the story. And it looks like it's going to have to be me, because they're over there. They can't tell you the story, their stories. But their stories are my stories are their stories. We all experience, not only myself, but I don't know how many hundreds of soldiers throughout, the whole European theater that served over there. They all have their special stories. Some of them maybe will probably even outshines everybody. But and of course, this trip, I guess what I'm trying to say, this trip is was many people who contributed to it. And I'd like to thank my daughter Barbara for helping me prepare for this trip. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to probably put all this together. Well, she's the one that really put it together for me. So I just, started way back in 1942 when I graduated from high school. I was 17 and I got a job at IBM. And I said, oh, this is great. And then it wasn't too long after I turned 18, I got my draft notice. And within a couple of months, I was in the Army now. And I had to report to Fort Niagara. And from Fort Niagara, we went down to Fort Leonard Wood, went through basic infantry training. And then they needed to bring the average age of the 28th Infantry, the Bloody Bucket Division, down under 30. They wanted to get 27, 28 years old because they were going to be part of the combat in the invasion. And so they were trying to get the age down. And of course, the Bloody Bucket gained its name from World War I and passed it on to World War II, where the Germans said they don't know enough to stop fighting. Regardless of what happens, they're still going to be in there fighting for liberty and justice and peace. And of course, this whole trip was funded by the Greater Generation Foundation. And 70th anniversary of D-Day. What is D-Day? D-Day is the deadline date. Like this morning, the deadline date was up for this talk. I'm going to be here. It's going to be here. I can't change it. Either I'm ready or not. I have no late input. So, it's a time when, even if you're going to the hospital for an operation, it's the same thing. They have a certain date and you're going to have to make it. And of course, we had the media covering us on this trip. And we were supposed to have a private dinner at the Dallas airport, which turns out to be a sandwich and a drink. And that was a private dinner, I think, okay. The 28 veterans ended up really going. It was supposed to be 32, couldn't make it. 19 Army, 7 Army Air Corps, and 2 Navy. And when we left the night before, and we flew all night long, and when we got off the plane, we went right over to Brookwood American Cemetery. And this is a picture of we were singing God Bless America. And then we had a traditional English brunch. We said, oh boy, this ought to be good. It turned out to be a sandwich and a drink. But we stayed at the Holiday Inn, Portsmouth, England. And then Sunday we were supposed to have a day off. A bunch of us decided to go to St. John's Cathedral in Portsmouth. And so we went there, and then from there the buses met us and took us to the D-Day Museum, which was very impressive. And of course, this shows the embroidery panel all the way around, all the different the units that were going to be involved. And they called this, of course, the whole thing was Operation Overloader. And they had all kinds of items, jeeps, tanks, landing craft, uniforms, artillery. And then we started, the veterans started telling the stories. This is a picture of Tom Piker, a glider pilot. The glider held the general's jeep that he was flying. He said when they cut him loose, when he got over the beach, he was on his own, and he landed. First he had a big bump, and then bang, that really stopped the glider. These Germans had made these pillar mounds, and he ran right into one. And the jeep, they're supposed to get out and unfasten the front end so that they can drag the jeep out. They didn't have to. The jeep took the front end right out. And the driver of the jeep was in there, and his jaw was over here. And the guy said, well, we're going to have to straighten him out. So they took him to the first aid station. The doctor took it, one look at him, he says, yeah, I think we can fix you. He went, whop! He went right back in place. He could talk again. So we had a casual dinner that night at the museum. That was more sandwiches and a drink. And then we went, and the next day we went Monday tour to Portsmouth Dockyard, which is very interesting. At this point, I'm going to have my daughter Barbara read a couple of the things here.
This is a picture of British veteran Jim Baker. And he was one of those determined to keep the mood upbeat. At the age of 92, he says, "I'm too old for any nonsense." Gesturing at the group of American veterans during a pause in the day's proceedings, he added, "I used to curse at those guys." He said, "I used to call them all names under the sun, but the truth is there aren't any buggers better than this." And then they had lunch with the British D-Day veterans.
Yeah. And that was mashed potatoes, a stew, and fish for dessert. And then we went to the Southwood House, where Eisenhower made his final decision about D-Day. And it was a very, very important day, and it weighed heavy on him to make that decision. And then after he made the decision, he went to his room, and they say he grieved for several hours before he come back down. And that evening, we went to an English pub, and we had fish and chips, which was very good. It was a big change in diet. And then we had the Scottish Piper story.
And as they were ready to disembark from their landing craft, Lord Lovett asked Private Bill Millen to play a tune known as the Highland Laddie. So Private Millen played the ancient march as the troops waited ashore on Sword Beach. As he stepped off the landing craft ramp into the water, his kilt floated up around him like a ballerina's tutu, and the soldier next to him was shot in the face and killed instantly, and his body bumping up against the piper's bare legs. As tradition dictated, he marched up and down the beach, standing erect with his pipes, while all those around him were taking cover as best they could. Later, he led them as they left the beach, heading inland, piping to the tune Road to Isles. Bill Millen was amazed he was not shot. Not only did he play standing up, but with his great Highland bagpipes skirling over the noise of the battle, he was hard to ignore. Sometime later, captured German soldiers told him they did not shoot him because they thought he was just a plain crazy man.
And this is a reenactment of which was, I thought, pretty spectacular because he played the bagpipes as the boat was moving onto the harbor. And then we went to, we went onto the ferry. The ferry was really, really huge. It was a lot bigger than the one we had here in Rochester. And so they were supposed to have lunch there in the ferry, which was more sandwiches and a drink again. But the honor guard did greet us as we were getting on the ferry, and it was the biggest ferry I've ever seen. And we landed at Cherbourg, which was a lot better than waiting ashore at Omaha Beach 70 years earlier. And then we were met by a bus, which was great because when we landed there 70 years earlier, we were on foot and we had to walk. So, and of course the bus itself, you can see the little patch over there on the right-hand side. There's a little dot there. Okay. And the bus had a special security pass, so we got MVP treatment all the way. And people would see that sign and they would wave and say, "Thank you for your service," and "Thank you for our freedom." And this next is a couple that I stayed with, Alan and Ann Crozier, and this is their family. And they were really heartfelt gratitude for the veterans. They took really good care of us. They showed us, real hospitality. And this is the road to their family house. And then there's the family host home. It shows the different buildings. Each building has special purpose. And inside, some of these buildings are 400, 500, 600 years old on the outside. And inside they've been modernizing them. This was the bedroom I had. And this is the kitchen. We each had our own shower. And one of the first things that they did to recognize us as we they had all these different celebrations. I mean, one after the other, and people taking our pictures and so forth. But this medal here was one of the ones, the Battle of Normandy, in 1944. We were honored with the medal as well. And then also, I also received the Legion of Merit, which was this one here. 10 of us received it. And President Helendale, the President of France, awarded us the medal. And then, of course, we celebrated D-Day, plus 70 years, or 22 heads of state there. President Obama, President Helendale, Queen Elizabeth, President Putin, Frank, Canada's Prime Minister, King of Belgium, King of Netherlands, Italy's President, King of Norway, Polish President, German Chancellor, and on and on and on. And we were supposed to sit there in the front row, but because these people all came, they sat in the front row seats. We had to move to a third row behind, where you can see the red arrow is. And then this is a picture of Joe Riley and Brandon Cope, which was one of the guardians. And he was the one Barbie kept checking on me to see if I was okay. She said, "Is Joe taking his medicine? Is Joe doing this?" And I said, "I'm fine. Tell her not to worry. You're in good hands." But he really kept her updated. And then on D-Day, there were 12,000 paratroopers. I didn't realize that many paratroopers had jumped on D-Day. But they had 1,200 jump for the D-Day 1944. They jumped, or 2014, I should say. I had no idea that so many of them had landed ahead of us. And but the 1,200 had jumped. They were from every different nation: Greece, Italy, and the Netherlands, all over. Each of them had an individual parachute, which they could maneuver to what they felt they wanted to have. And they'd come right down, putting her onto the reviewing stand. And then the next one, we went to the Brittany American Cemetery at St. James, France. And many of the 28th Division that I fought with are buried there. The division lost Prittner, just in the hedgerows, Prittner 40 to 50% of the division was lost. And then on Omaha Beach, I ran into the colonel and the general of the current paratroopers, and he gave Joe Riley a cricket. He pulled it out of his pocket. He said, "Joe, you know what this is?" And he cricket, back then when they landed at nighttime, there was no way to communicate. So you pushed the cricket, and if I heard the cricket from the back of the room, I knew that was an American soldier, it wasn't a German, so I didn't shoot. So that's what Joe's story, And of course, here he and I are looking at the different crosses there. I was looking for the 20th Infantry, and he was looking for the 101st Airborne. He had the same uniform he had on, and that he had on in 1944, which is amazing. And then this next picture, as Paul Harvey used to say, "Now for the rest of the story." You all probably heard of it one time or another. And this was the first time I really saw the big picture in 70 years. My focus back in 1944 was on Omaha Beach, that's all. I knew there were landings at other beaches. I didn't even know the name. I had no idea. And I didn't realize the beach was 50 miles long. And most of the stuff at the invasion, we had to bring in on the beaches. We didn't have the ability or any Cherbourgs or anything. We didn't even have it captured back then. We had to capture that. And so that was one of the key things that we had to have, is some way to bring all this equipment for, thousands of soldiers that were going to be arriving. They had to have jeeps and trucks and camping equipment, K-rations, ammunition, all kinds of different things that had to be across the bay there. The Americans used Utah Beach and then Omaha Beach. And then the British troops invaded Bull and Sword, and the Canadian troops invaded Juno Beach. And this is a picture of me looking over the beach, and over on the, just over my left shoulder, you can see the people walking up the path. That's the path that we took up to the beach, to our assembly area. And then 70 years ago, we crossed the channel on a hang on. Ship, yeah, it was and we transferred the troops to the landing craft. And you talk about the beach the way it looked like in 1944. There were bombers overhead, boom, 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 one right after the other. And this picture shows a pretty good impression of what D-Day looked like. The equipment was laying all over, soldiers were, bodies were laying all over, and it looked like, well, it looks like we were going to go into hell the way it looked. The ground was shaking, and it was really rough going. And then first German soldier I got to see had been killed earlier, and maggots were crawling all over him. And I thought, wow, my parents wouldn't even take me to the funeral parlor because they thought maybe it'd be, have some kind of a reaction or something. And here I am looking at the poor German soldier. But that bothered me because I was often had to wonder, we had to keep going a lot of times, and we had to leave our wounded and the dead soldiers behind us. And I was hoping grave registration would get them picked up and taken care of before all these different things happened to them, like the maggots or whatever. And they're just laying out there. And so going back and seeing all those crosses, I realized that, yes, they were all taken care of. One time or another, maybe. But there were so many at every moment of time there, it was hard to handle them all. And of course, during the hedgerows, one of the stories I have was a crossroads where I kept telling the guys to get down, and we was part of the company headquarters. I was supposed to be a runner between the headquarters and the company K, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose there in the hedgerows. There was 88s coming in, mortar shells coming in, and it seems like the whole place was shaking, and I could hear the guys call, "Where's my leg? Where's my leg? What happened to my leg?" And the other guys, people were calling, "Medic, medic, medic!" And a lot of them weren't even crying because they'd been killed. And the fellow that I was supposed to help out, the radio man, he never got down, and he had a piece of fragment go right through his body, right into the radio, and the radio was kaput. Couldn't use the radio anymore. So the captain came over and he said, "I'd like to have you go up and tell Company K to keep following the instructions we received early this morning." So I brushed off all the stone and rocks, and I thought I'd been hit. And I probably did have some bruises, I'm not sure. But I started up to go up to K Company through the hedgerows, and all of a sudden I could hear this 88 coming in. And I thought, oh boy, it's got my number on it. I flattened right out on the ground, and all of a sudden, nothing. It didn't go off. It was a dud. So I got out of there in a hurry. And I didn't want to wait to see if it went off. And I later learned that, there were the Polish women, when they were making these 88 shells, when they didn't think the German guard was looking at them, they wouldn't load it with the proper compound, so they were really pushing the duds out through, and I must have caught one of them. I call that divine intervention. I mean, how would you know? For some reason or other. And then I got to the point where I got up there and I told Company K commander, and he said, "Well, you might even go stay here now and be part of back in the squad that you came from." So I went back, and I was yelling at God or what, and why are you letting all this happen? And it gave me a peace beyond all understanding that I was there for a purpose. That's where he wanted me to be. and that I'm going to have to accept that. And I realized that every time I picked up my N1 rifle, I was going to have to pray. I prayed, and I say, let your kingdom, let your will be done. And so that was kind of hard for me to do. I'd say I never used that before. Let your will be done. But I gave myself to God. I said, either way, I'm going to. If I get killed, good. This is what He wanted. If I make it, then He's got other plans for me, other purpose for me. And so, luckily, that gave me a lot of confidence in being able to keep going forward, because there was no going back for me. And you can hear the guys calling out the wounded and the dying, and it was very, very impressive. Then, of course, this picture here is a picture of how we came across the channel. We went up to Paris, and from Paris we went into Germany.
All on foot.
All on foot. And then this is the copy of the Arc de Triomphe when we marched through Paris, and the arrow shows where I am. Now this is a stamp. The next one is a stamp, so you can see this has been magnified. The first one has been magnified quite a bit. But I did recognize myself. I knew I was the third row back, third row in the end. And so they blew it up enough so I could really get a good look at it. And I knew that was myself. And one of the things that, one of the French asked me to go down to this farm. And I said, what do you want me to go down to the farm for? And I said, well, there's something there you should see. So I went down and I went into the farmhouse where they ate. And there was a mother and father and grandfather and grandmother and 4 children. And it looked like they were eating, just sitting there with a knife and fork in their hand. And every one of them had been shot in the back of the head. And the lesson that we were supposed to learn was, when we come to America, this is what's going to happen to your family. So, that was pretty hard to take. And then another one was, we had 4 Germans, and I'm not sure whether they were Germans or Polish. Sometimes they use Polish in their troops, and they come out with a white flag. And I thought, well, the lieutenant said, can anybody speak German? Well, nobody could speak German. He said, well, what about Polish? And he said, well, this one fellow, I guess he was from Chicago, where I guess if they go to school there, they learn how to speak Polish. And he could speak Polish pretty fluently. And that fellow said he'd go down with him. So they went down the top of the 4 people that wanted to surrender. And all of a sudden, the German lieutenant opened up fire and killed all 6 of them. And when you see things like that, you wonder, this has all got to stop somehow. And another situation was in the Herchen Forest, the tank. My buddy and I decided that maybe we could take out a tank. The tank was going this way, we were this way. If we hit it in the gearing there, that would stop the tank. But we never got to do that. The hedgerow blew up in front of us, and all of a sudden, everybody said, we're pulling back, we're pulling back. And so we started going back, and all of a sudden, out of the sky comes a fighter pilot. And he takes out the tank. But just an instant before, microseconds before, I could spot this foxhole up on the hill there. So I went up and jumped in. I didn't know whose foxhole it was. And I just got in there in the nick of time when that pilot blew up the tank. And there was Germans and American soldiers on both sides of that tank. We were still fighting. They were asking us to surrender. There's I'm not sure if they, I know before that I could see about 120 did surrender. They were coming in, put the 88 right down to the foxhole and blowing them right out of the foxhole. So they decided to go over to the wooded area. And I learned a few years later that in the wooded area, they were all German soldiers, so they had to surrender. And a lot of them that weighed 190 pounds come back from that, they weighed 150 to 120 pounds. And they didn't have the food to eat, but most of them regained their health with good care and getting back and eating good meals to put on, get their weight back. And then one of the other stories, I thought there was divine intervention in that one. Another story was during the Battle of the Bulge, we just laid out there in the snow. I put my pad down, or poncho down, and got into my sleeping bag and put another tarp over me. And I thought, oh boy, I've been so cold and I never froze so I thought I was going to freeze to death. But anyway, I went to sleep, and all of a sudden I could feel the warmth. The sun was shining. I was at the beach. Oh, how wonderful that was. And I, oh boy, you know, but something told me, Joe, get up. And I probably was about that far from hypothermia. If I laid there any longer, I'd froze to death. But that's not only that we did against the weather. A lot of them were having trench foot. They would get frostbite in their feet, and they have to go back, and some of them remove their toes or feet or whatever. And they would come into me and pull out their boot and show me they would have gangrene. The sores on their trench foot would be broken open, and gangrene was coming out. Then of course, the other time we were 5 days without food or water. And they said on the 6th day that if we wanted to get back, come back through German lines, they couldn't get into us, anything, supplies or anything, food or anything into us. We'd have to come back through the German lines. So there's three others and myself decided that's the route we would take. We'd try to get back. I figured if we could walk through the woods and be careful, we should be able to make it back. But there's another 127 that didn't think they could make it, so they stayed there, and they were all captured, and they spent the rest of the war in prison. And so I think that was sort of a divine intervention in a way, telling me, you know, this is where they wanted me to go. And then General Patton, I stood right next to him Koblitz. They had, above Koblitz was a special fort where they had stored all the loot they had taken from the Jewish people and churches and everything. They had all kinds of gold and jewelry and clothes and everything else in this fort. But it was the last time the American flag was taken down in World War I, and so they wanted to make it the first place where they raised it in World War II. So I was lucky to be there at the time. And let's get,
Yeah, this is picture on the left is Joe Mack before he went to battle. This was the swell guy. This was the guy that just graduated from high school and was working at IBM and got drafted, and he was going to go fight the Nazis. And when he was in France, before he came home, he had another portrait done. And I just want you to pay attention to his eyes, the before and after. You can see where the innocence was lost in his eyes, where he went into it with a little twinkle in his eye and then came out of it he had seen some horrendous things, and I really appreciate what my dad did.
And we did have an opportunity to go in touch with, visit with the school children, and that was, and they had some good questions. They could talk English, and freedom kept coming up. Freedom this and freedom that, and freedom was what we all fought for. And you know, I guess if I have a message, and I would say that freedom is very fragile. If we don't take care of it, you lose it. If you lose it, you don't get it back. You know, and things that are going on now, and we're moving more and more towards socialism, where the government wants to get into a lot of different aspects of our life. Some of it is kind of under the cover. We don't realize it's going on, but it's been going on. And if we don't do something, we're going to lose a lot of our freedom that we had. Now, if we lose the freedom, everybody who wants looking for freedom from all the different countries in the world, where do they come? The United States. If we lose our freedom here, where are they going? Where else in the world can they even come close to the freedoms that we have? So we have to protect it. So I urge all the parents and grandparents and you know, talk to the children, tell your stories. You know, like we see today in some of the videos here that talk to them, you know, make them aware. You know, if you don't, they'll come in and say, "Hi, Grandpa," and then they'll go to the bedroom and play their games. Well, sit down and talk with them and make them realize that, you know, if we don't start when they're small, we lose them when they get older. You know, and if they grow up thinking about the politics that are going on, thinking about, you know, about this great nation of ours, how are we going to protect it, and how we're going to, you know, keep our freedom. When I looked at those graves, and we took an estimate of how many graves were over there, there was pretty close to 360,000 graves that men from the United States gave their lives for freedom. And that's a lot of graves. I tell you, I mean, you see those crosses and it just makes you want to cry. Because these people, these soldiers will never be, a lot of them will never be married, never have a family, never have grandchildren. Their story ended right over there. They're the real heroes. I'm just doing my job. I was a survivor. And I want to honor those people, and that's why I was doing this talk, because I want to honor them for what they did and what for our veterans are still doing today. I mean, it's something to be able to lay your life on the line and know that your purpose in life is to secure freedom for everyone, not only for ourselves, but for everyone. And I would like to close this with a prayer. So if you'd like to stand, we could pray together, or I'll pray. And Lord God, may your kingdom come for all the people of every race and language, your kingdom of justice, of peace, of love, and may all the earth be filled with your glory. And we offer our prayer. Amen.